Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in on a Friday evening. Um, just to go over a couple of notes before we join in. So, you have already attended quite a few ISTIC sessions already, so you know how this works. But just to go over it again, what we're doing differently today is that instead of dropping your questions in the Q&A, it would be great if you could just raise your hand. We'll let you unmute yourself. You can turn on your cameras. Like, that's a preference that our speaker has indicated, that he would love to have like a face-to-face direct conversation with you, which is always helpful to just make sure the flow is great. So I let everyone just give permission to turn on your cameras, turn on your mic, and you'll be able to ask questions as we move along. I'll quickly then, and apart from that, if you have any network issues or anything like that, you can still feel free to just drop your question in the Q&A box. But we would highly suggest just making this as interactive as possible. Yeah, I think that's it from my end. I'll hand it back to you, Siddharth. You can take us through the session for today.
Thanks a lot, Pusham. So for a good number of weekends right now, we've had interactions or we've had conversations with your startup, your founders at your varying stages, and I really hope you've been able to draw out from their experience. Today we have Subbu, who's your founder. You're from Fermbox. Subbu, over to you. Do make an introduction of yourself, your experience so far, and we can probably take the conversation on from there.
Yeah, thanks, Siddharth and Purvasha and GFI. It's always a pleasure to interact with you guys and also with fellow entrepreneurs. Hi, everybody. My name is Subbu, and I've been an entrepreneur last 25 years, I think. First generation. So I started a biotech company in 2000. And before that, I was briefly in Biocon for about a year. But otherwise, I'm a misfit in the industry. I'm a textile engineer. So for all of you entrepreneurs who are entering biotech and who are not from the science, the skills needed to build entrepreneurship is same. And you don't have to be a scientist as long as you know how to connect dots. So having said that, I started my career truly as an enzyme company. We were trying to make novel applications of enzymes. We did that fairly successfully. And in early 2000s, sustainability was not what it is today, right? People wanted to be more sustainable, but businesses drove sustainability as the last option, right? It was a good to have and not a must have. What has happened in 20 years is now it's a must have. I mean, with the population growth, with receding resources, and all of you are entrepreneurs of your own right, so you know I don't have to spell about it. But the fact is that the tenets of the business haven't changed, right? It's just that we are now replacing a supply chain at the end of the day, which came from animals or it came from forest produce. And now we are trying to do this in a more, I would say, efficient manner using biotech tools, which has become more affordable now. But at the same time, the business tenets haven't changed, because when you're in a business, the first responsibility you have is to create value to the stakeholders while you're creating impact. So I would personally look at any product or service or space, not because it would be nice to do, but it should be a business which can stand on its own feet. And having said that, I built companies which made fermentation-based products much before what it is called now. Now we call them alternative proteins, we call them cultivated meat, but this is tech, as you know, which survived last 60, 70 years, and we're just making more affordable products now, which can go into mainstream, which we can find in the kitchen shelves, etc. And I think the science is going through a transformation right now. All of you are part of the transformation. I'm sure each of you have something unique, special that you're going to bring. And so congratulations for you guys for taking that bold step. And at the same time, all the best. So that.
Thanks a lot for that introduction, Subbu. So while your participants gather their thoughts around what they want to ask you, I had a couple of thoughts while you were making your introduction. You started, like you mentioned, you're 20, 25 years ago in this space, or you're primarily in the space for a little more than a decade and a half at least, right? What has changed from your 15, 20 years ago to where the sector is right now?
Well, 15, 20 years ago, biotech entrepreneurs were more like orphans, right? We were trying to do something and nobody really, one, understood what you did, like any orphan who's still a kid, and they didn't understand what you're going through. Neither the banks nor investors wanted to even touch you with a glass rod because we were science dependent. We were talking about innovation, and what we did was never understood. And I would say to a great extent that has changed over the years. Apart from the cost of doing science, I think the macroeconomic situations as well as the willingness of investors, willingness of banks to see value in biotech or knowledge-based industries have changed quite a bit. And the support system, I think as a country, if I look at it globally, yes, there have been always pockets where biotech was supported, but India itself has moved towards innovation being the future strategy of India. And I think India has also come of age where people who would like to hunker down and stay in a job are stepping out and becoming entrepreneurs. And the government is providing at least a seed capital, there's DBT, there's BIRAC. And then you have multiple investors who are looking at it. I remember when I raised my first round, I ran the company for 8 years without funding. So we were always looking at generating cash to do research, and we did that. But in 2009, when I first met my investors, they invested in me because they knew me, right? And they did not know the science. And even now, I think there's a little challenge in diligence. So when any of you are looking at fundraising, you're going to find that your investors don't know the right people who could do diligence for you. So I would say, like, anybody in sales or marketing would say, like, you need to help your customers buy rather than you try to sell. So you may have to do a lot more work even now to put together and not just talk about tech, right? Or not just talk about the opportunity. I think you need to bring that in. And I'm seeing entrepreneurs themselves have become better storytellers. Way back, I think most Indians would be very stuck up and we wouldn't know how to make presentations. And then I'm seeing now that entrepreneurs themselves can give a very good narrative on what they're trying to solve. And on terms of infrastructure, I think the country has created 74 incubation centers, which most startups could tap into. They could, in fact, Fermbox is operating in one such incubation center. So my setup cost was nothing and I could operate from the next day. Whereas 15 years ago, you had to find a place, you had to get approvals. It was a nightmare. And I think it's good time for Indian entrepreneurs in biotech space now. And still, in terms of high risk research, I think there's a little hesitation, but I think that will change too.
So interestingly, you mentioned the lack of an ecosystem when you started, a lack of investors or your funding avenues. Yet you decided to come into this space, right? So what were your motivations behind that? So
when I started, I realized there are 4 things which matter to human beings, right? Because when I was in Biocon in the sales job, I was exposed to a lot of industries, sugar, paper, textiles, biotech in general, including biopharma, etc. And I was just wondering, what is it that I can do which makes a difference, right? And I found that food, energy, and water are the 3 things which we need, right? We can do without even artificial intelligence, but you need food, you need clean water, you need, the environment to be good. And then I had kids around 2004, and I realized that if I have to tell my kids what I'm doing, it needs to be something of impact. I could just be in a job and be rich, but then what did your dad do, right? So that was a big motivation for me, that whatever I'm doing is going to be something I'll be proud of. And when I told my mother this is what I'm doing, at first she was like, will it make money? But then very soon when I explained what I'm trying to solve, she used to tell me how it was back in her day. She was born in 1936. She's still with me. She's seen the whole country change pre-independence to now. And she used to say, and well, even we experienced when we went to school, we would have water from the tap, right? We never carried water from home in the tank after play, or we would eat food, share food quite easily, whether it's hawkers or otherwise. Now we can't do that. So that's how I said, let me do something. And I saw that biotech has a touch point in water, in energy, in food, in agriculture. So it was kind of exciting for me. And I didn't really look at what others did. It was just exciting for me that you could use high tech into various industries and applications. And that's what I did. And then in 2009-10, while I was an enzyme company making solutions for the industries, my kids were getting vaccinated, right, as they grew up, and I had another kid, and I saw that some of the vaccines we were giving them had animal components, right? And then when I read more about it, being a biotech person, like what are these components and what is the risk? I found that actually animal-derived components are used massively in bioform, making medicines and stuff like that. And if there's a virus in the animal component, it's going to move into the kid whom you're going to vaccinate. It actually made, I thought I'm protecting the kids. Then I thought, oh my God, what have I done, right? And there have been several such cases where, viruses made it into children without them being exposed to the real source. And that's when we said, let's make animal-free ingredients for the biopharma industry. So that's how the journey into recombinant products and proteins happened. And then what happened? We started building a whole basket around it. So we made albumin, we made transferrin, we made growth factors, everything for the biopharma industries because they could afford it. And then since 2016-17, I realized that the world is waking up to biomaterials. They're looking at, cultivated meat. They're looking at flavors, fragrances, colors, egg protein, milk protein, and anyone who ever went to a lab would come out with an idea, and they were getting some support to get that going. Right. And I think that changed how we look at biotech and its application in our daily lives. Else you and I would never even, and for me, that was like vindication that I was in the right path too. So it further motivated me saying that, you know what, even if I've had one successful career, I exited the company, I need to do this again. And there is enough and more opportunity for everybody. So for me today, when I look at the products everybody is trying to make, we are really making an impact. And for the first time, I think India is on the starting point because most of them are on the starting point. We don't have to make biosimilars or generics, but we could make our own meat for our own people. We could make our own proteins or our own chemical alternatives using bio tools. So we have a chance to solve for India and the world. And I think that's what's exciting me to continue to do this for next 15 years.
That's amazing. I think, Yapusha, we have one hand up. Can you let them in?
Hi, Subbu. This is Yashu here from Fermbox Foods. I'd like to ask you a question about how did you go about, attracting the first employees of your company, and how did you retain them, right? As early stage startups ourselves, when we go about hiring, we see experts, we want experts to join our team, but we're at a point that we are not able to afford them. So what are your thoughts on this? And I'd like to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, that's a very good question. But I think as an entrepreneur, our first job is to be the best salesman, right? I would not offer a job to somebody when I talk to them. I would talk about what I'm trying to solve. I would try to connect them to the story, which is always hidden in most of the professionals or experts, that they want to achieve something more than just a job. And I think it's not an easy thing to do, but you can actually master how to tell your story. So you should take every employee, a very important employee, like you said, experts, as seriously as you would talk to an investor, because you cannot build a company without people. That's why it's called a company, right? Company of people. So you need to actually approach your experts you want to hire with your story, not with the job. And it's always worked for me because I'm trying to make them visualize how they would give back to the society. Now, when you said experts, I assume these are people who have spent 10, 20 years in the industry. Believe me, if they've done 10, 15 years in the industry, they are itching to do something which has real impact, which rolls back to them. Like if you're an employee in Pfizer or a Biocon, you're just a small dot in the big ocean, right? And they all want to be visible. They want to do something that really matters to them. So give them that visibility, give them that importance. And invariably, you would find people interested to come and work with you if the story resonates with them. The other question that they'll all ask you is, have you raised money? Have you, do you have enough money to afford me, right? These are some of the questions you'll have. So you could always work with them by speaking about how they are part of the value creation itself, because they are your early partners. They are your early, I won't call them employees, your early team, and they become part of that journey. And I think most of them are itching for that opportunity. And that's what I'm seeing when I'm like right now, Fermbox is just 6-7 years old. Yes, I do have a little advantage because people know that I had built a company, but you could actually attract the best talent by being open. And it's okay to be a little vulnerable with the team you're going to hire, as long as your story is solid. And that's how I would do it. And then if not the experts, try to go after advisors whom you can attract, because the presence of the advisors would bring credibility to your company, right? So go to, it could be your professors, it could be somebody who's somebody in the society to come on board, to not for money, not to invest money, but to say, I back this story. And then make sure that your website communicates that as well, because what do people do? They go online, they look up about you, they look about what you liked or what you wrote about. So spend more time digitally to build that profile and make sure that you are visible as a professional organization. And when you create infrastructure, or when you create an office space or a lab, make sure it's nice. You don't want to set this up on the roof of your building and expect, somebody who's worked in an MNC to come and join you. So these are investments you should never shy away from. And also try to build complementary strengths and explain to them how their strength is going to add great value to you, because people love to give, right? If you're going to go across and say, I'm going to take what you know, you're not going to have many takers. So whenever I hire people, even though they're willing to join, I actually tell them how their role is going to be complementary to the rest of us and how the company is going to immensely benefit. People at 15, 20 years experience in their jobs want to give. So just make it possible for them to come join you and give. And then as an entrepreneur, you have to keep your engine burning, right? So you've got to solve for how you're going to pay, what you're going to pay. And then when you promise somebody something, you make sure you deliver, even to the first guy, because the first guy will talk to the second guy and the second guy will talk to the third guy. So building that trust with the initial employees or team members you have will really work. Thirdly, you would have people and friends in your industry, right, who know you. So get them to speak about you, because people are going to check references. They're going to go on your LinkedIn and figure out who else they know, who you also know. So make sure anyone and everyone in your network knows what you're doing and how exciting this is, because that's how you're going to attract talent.
Thank you so much, Sivu. I think that's like a wonderful response to me, because I'm going to meet that expert this evening as well in person. So these are some great pointers that I can carry with me. And like you said, it's about the impact, right? That we're going to dive deep in the impact that we want to create in this world and see if we're a good fit and take this forward. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have any other hands up? Not yet.
Not right now.
Okay.
Not yet.
All right. Yeah, quickly just continuing with what we were talking about, Subbu. So we know the nascency in its of the alternative protein space that that exists currently in the country, right? What do you see as maybe a pathway for your startups who decide to start or form a company here today?
Yeah. I think, like the old adage goes, spend more time in preparation and very less time in execution. I think most of us entrepreneurs are so excited about the idea that we want to execute before thinking about it, right? And I think that's the biggest problem we all face as entrepreneurs. So I would suggest you spend at least 5 to 6 months preparing and understanding your idea better, preparing how you're going to go about execution, preparing who you'll come bring on board, preparing how you'll present your company. And the big advantage, I think, the nascency of this industry in cultivated meat or in precision fermentation is that there has been a template in US, in Europe, in Israel, where people have done this. So spend a lot of time to track these companies and understand what they did, how they did, and what mistakes they did, right? And if I were any of the early stage entrepreneurs, I would spend some money, the first part of the money, go and travel to these conferences, whether it's by GFI or Future Food Tech or cultivated meat programs, and watch it. Even though you may not meet everybody, but it's an opportunity to interact and talk about it. They don't know that you're a startup. You can always give your card or share information about it, but prepare. So make a website, talk about your story. So even if you meet somebody, they're going to go and check that, right? So prepare that. And even if it costs you a bit, but you can always reach out to these organizers saying that you're a startup. You can always mail them and say, hey, can I get some special waiver because I haven't yet raised funds? I'm coming there to meet people. This is my story. And I have seen cases where the organizers give you sometimes a free pass, right? And there have been conferences I have attended in the past on somebody's borrowed badge because I just want to attend and I'm like, can I borrow your badge for like 2 hours? And so you make sure that you make that trip. And a lot of these conferences will give you a lot of clarity of what you should not do. You will also see what you should do. And getting out there in the market is the first thing that any entrepreneur should be doing, even before they actually decide to put money or raise funds, etc. Because even when you go to an investors meeting, knowing all this somewhere in your head will help you give better answers, because they may throw you a name and say, hey, what about this company? How are you different from them? Right? Invariably, we cook up an answer and we give it. And trust me, people know. So don't fib. If you don't know something, you kind of step back and say, I don't know about that company. Right? And that's how you would actually benefit by spending more time in preparation. And that's my advice.
So while you were talking about, preparation and even you're talking about scale, right? So I know, and I'll come back, I'll circle back to the investor, you're part of it in a bit. But a lot of people tend to ask, what does your organization look like at scale? So since you have already been through that path, what do you think is the most realistic scenario for organizations who have probably done your prototype, your POC at a MVP level today? And how different a scale actually look?
Yeah, so there are two parts to this. For any entrepreneur's journey in cultivated meat or in any bioprocess industry, there's time till POC, and then there's time for pilot. Then there's time for proving cost economics. Then comes scale. Nobody is going to fund you for scale before you prove that you're going to be reasonably viable, right? Now, in order to do that, you have to break your strategy into these parts as well. So one, get your POC right. Now, POC is not half done. POC, in my opinion, is only 10% of your job. It gets you probably the first check or the second check at the most, right? You may have early stage angels, and then you'll have a small seed fund who would give you probably $1 million to put a POC out. But the real value of death starts after your POC. You may be thinking that, till I get POC, my problems are a lot, and after that I'll be good. But actually, your real grunt work starts after that. Be wary about how you're diluting as well, right? Because some of the mistakes people do is that we over dilute early on, which means you don't have room to raise funds when you actually are in a better place and you want to go for scale. In terms of in cultivated meat, for example, in terms of scale, I think building a few cells in the lab, most of us can do it. In probably 5 to 6 months, you'll have the cells, etc. I think the key challenge is to see what are your cost structures. knowing your cost structures now and knowing what the cost structures will be later is very important. One way you could solve for the cost structures is when you engage with companies who provide you ingredients or provide you media. Media cost is a big cost. While you may buy at reagent costs, which are very high initially at your POC level, you're going to be talking to them saying, hey, if I need this in tons or I need this in hundreds of kilos, how would the cost curve look like? So you factor that into your scale model rather than taking your cost of a reagent into your future projection. Two, the organization, you will not believe it, will have fewer tech people, but the rest of them will be operational people. So you need to demonstrate that you will have supply chain, which is a non-core activity. You will need a finance team who can manage the entire volume of work. You will need to plan for infrastructure, which means you need to look at people who can do the scaling of your tech and try to bring them in early, either as consultants or as advisors, because when you're designing in your R&D, it's better to know what problems you'll face in scale. Some of the issues I have seen with my customers is that they made a POC, they made a pilot, and then they made cost projections, which are unrealistic, or the tech they used, like say, for example, when you grow cells, how are you going to separate it? Or how are you going to put it on the scaffold is not solved. And they think what you did in the lab is going to work out in large scale. So there are a lot of limitations in large scale in the engineering part. So it's just makes sense to bring somebody who has done, maybe they've made monoclonal antibodies, maybe they've made some other products which are related to cell-based or fermentation-based. You try to bring them in as your advisors or experts to give you that sounding board to say, hey, if I use this kind of a downstream, will it be scalable? And I think people who can build and operate those plants will become part of your scale model. And lastly, the infrastructure itself, right? Now, the infrastructure that you need, you're talking about hundreds of tons. So you need to see how you can collaboratively work with somebody to build that scale, because raising that kind of money is kind of far-fetched from an India story. So you need to be a global company. So when you imagine scale, one piece I forgot is the quality control, right? So your future scale will look, an organization will look like, there is a team for R&D, which all of you would know what would be there, what the organogram would be there, who will do upstream, downstream, with cell line, etc. That you already know. But the rest of it is something many of us may not know. Supply chain, finance, execution and operations, quality control, and large scale operations. Now, you should spend a lot of time to understand about the byproducts or the waste products you produce as well, because in large scale manufacturing, the environmental impact of your wastewater or your whatever you want to dispose becomes the biggest Achilles heel. Most entrepreneurs don't realize that you are going to produce waste even though you're making cultivated meat. And how are you going to retreat that waste? In cultivated meat, how are you going to reuse the media? How are you going to separate the cells, for example? How are you going to run a longer batch? So your scale model should factor the common risks that are existing in this industry. And in your presentations, you need to talk about the risks that you are going to address and how you're going to go about mitigation. I think all investors will know that you're going to have risks. Typically, entrepreneurs will go and say, I figured it all out. There are no risks. But that's not true, right? So you need to say, these are the risks I'm going to face. I'm aware of it. And this is how I plan to mitigate it, right? And that story will become much easier because your investor will ask you mid-presentation, hey, what are the risks? So you should already have a slide down below where you can talk about it, scale-up risk or people risk or technology risk, etc. Lastly, whenever it comes to operational matters, you also have to see the regulatory part of things. That's why I said QC, QA, because in which country do they allow it? What is the Indian story about, scaling up such processes? Do they allow us to sell? What's the pathway that it takes? Because typically we think we make the product and the government will allow us to sell. No, there's going to be a registration process. There's going to be an approval process. Factor that in your time for commercialization. And without that, your scale model will not work. Your timelines will not work. And that's what I have to add there.
So, interestingly, at least for your startups in the B2C space, right? I know that given how niche the sector is, you end up also chasing the same your customer, or at least for your similar your products, right? Does the scale your trajectory look any different out there?
Can you repeat that question?
No, I'm saying for your B2C customer, for for your companies working in the B2C space, where maybe your customer, your segments are quite niche or quite narrow, right, to that extent. Does the scale, your trajectory also look, you maybe very similar to what you mentioned as a B2B company?
So there are two parts here, right? One is to make your cultivated meat or a product in large scale. Then comes the formulation part, where you actually make a food product, or you make your cells into a burger or into a sausage, or you make a protein and make an ice cream, or you make cheese or whatever. That's the second part of your manufacturing process altogether. Now, go to market is one of the most expensive things to do. It's easier to grow the cells, but go to market is a more expensive thing, and that's where most of them are burning their money to create awareness. But believe me, my view on this is customers already know about cultivated meat. Customers already know about alternative proteins. They are willing to eat it and have it. But their problem is at what cost, right? So if you make a product or a solution at the bulk level, forget about the finished product. Because if you're making a product, you can make a finished product of it, right? Now, if you are going to forget price parity being your main challenge, no matter how big you scale and you're making negative returns on your product, you're not going to be successful. And you're seeing this story with many, many companies which are happening right now. Many of them have launched in restaurants, for example, cultivated meat, etc. They're still negative. So they're saying, we are going to take this much time to solve the price parity. How are we going to solve it? It's not just scale of manufacturing, but optimizing media cost, optimizing process cost, energy cost, how you design your plant, etc. So spend more time to get your price parity right. Go to market is sexy. It's very attractive. We all like to go up on stage and speak. So one of my advisors told me like 15 years ago, your time on stage will come, right? Make your product work, because when it works, you'll have everybody calling you. Even the advanced cultivated meat guys or protein guys are going to call you and say, hey, can I use your tech? Can I use your product? Can you just license to me? So I would suggest everyone's focus should be to try and build price parity early on in their model and figure out how they will arrive price parity, right? In fact, one of the inputs I forgot to mention earlier, in India, we have what we call the National Biodiversity Act, right? So if any of you are using Indian cell lines, like from some animals or chicken or whatever, you make sure that you're cleared as far as the National Biodiversity Act is concerned. Recently, there was an update, but I haven't read more about it because the Parliament did some changes just 2 days ago. The National Biodiversity Act was meant to protect our flora and fauna, right? Like basmati rice, turmeric, etc. But they put a blanket ban on any biotech company using any living matter from plants or animals which are on Indian soil for commercial exploitation. So you can't file an patent, you can't commercially sell if you used a cell line from a cow or from a sheep or a chicken, or you took some bacteria from the soil. This is not going to work. So make sure you align with the National Biodiversity Act. There is a way around it where you can import the cell lines for the time being till the act sorts itself out. You could buy from one of the libraries and show that you have received these cell lines from an international depository, which means then you'll be allowed to make and sell. So just make sure you'll cover the National Biodiversity Act. There is no clear answers, but you have to maneuver that.
Interesting. You're probably not be a good time to come to your initial investor conversation, right? And I think we've
We
had
have
yeah,
one
yeah,
person is raised. I'll just quickly take that question first.
sure.
Hello. Am
Hi,
I
Dr.
audible?
Kadalmani. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Subbu. Very interesting insights. And this national biodiversity, I would just rush. I have to rush back to the lab and see how I need to work around this. This is very critical, very critical, I would say, and major roadblocks for the persons, people like us who have just tried to get some cells from the system and try to make it immortal and go ahead. And thanks for that. I need your advice. So for example, if we are growing cells at lab scale and want to go to pilot scale, and we do not have facilities around. So in terms of, let's say 10 liters or 20 liters fermenters as such to generate quality data. So how should I go over it? Because most of the incubation centers, they have microbial expression systems, and which is a central facility for all incubatees. So they are unwilling to set the parameters, change some of the parameters. And because if it goes down, it would jeopardize the facility for all the incubatees. So under such scenario, what would be your advice to move further?
So this is a larger problem. It's not just your problem, right?
Yeah,
Whether it's even
exactly.
microbial or cultivated meat, there are no facilities. In fact, myself, along with Abel, even with GFI, we've made several representations. In fact, we have offered our services to even bring investors and operate the plant, because the challenge is not just the facility, but somebody's got to operate to suit the requirements of individual users.
Very true, very true.
And so the government is responsive. In fact, we're having another meeting to see, can we build pilot facilities for both microbial as well as cultivated meat, specifically for the food and alternative protein, along with incubation centers. So it's a little bigger problem. So if I were you, there were a couple of things that I would do, right? One is I would look at, there are facilities which grow cells, right? Mammalian cells, etc., etc. The only problem with the mammalian cell facilities is if they have spare space, they should be usually open to run a batch for you, because you don't have any modifications, it should not impact. So you could identify what, see, if you go to companies like Syngene, Origin, they're not going to do it because they are so full with their projects, they don't want to spare time. But I think there are facilities which are like 20 liters or 10 liters kind of small facilities. You don't need the GMP, you don't need the air and all these controls. So you could reach out to traditional biopharma companies who may have that. And again, as I said, sell the story with somebody you know in the company who could actually help you run a small batch. But the other way to do it is to take a little risk. And if you have a POC, to write to the grants that is available of 50 lakhs or 1 crore or 2 crore. It may not be a grant, it may be a soft loan, but it's much cheaper than investor money. And you don't even need, you just need a controlled area. You don't need necessarily clean air, etc., except you can put it into a safety hood and do the job. Like we grew some fat cells, we grew some animal cells while we were testing our media components, which were, you need to do a bioassay. Nobody wants to share, like you wouldn't share your media recipe with me. And then we were able to do that with doing a little bit of our Indian way of thinking on using different kind of, like you have the spinner flask, for example, you could use an alternative one to actually do a batch. So you may want to be a little more innovative and create small equipment by using equipment fabricators who are all trying to get into this space. So one of the things that we did was we went and talked to the guys who build bioreactors. They always have one to do with them. They're not a biotech company, but they're not in your radar either. So there are companies like Praj is there is Biozine. They will have a demonstration unit. So for you, it doesn't matter as long as you can go and experiment with them, because they're not you're not risking your tech either, because they don't want to make these cells. They want to sell you a reactor. So should you engage with them and say, look, if you allow me to use a 5-liter bioreactor, I will buy your equipment when I raise funds and I go to the next stage. So people have run batches with equipment manufacturers. That could be one option for you. The third option is to look internationally. There are incubation centers globally available where you could go and run a small batch. but it's a cost, but it's still worth it if you think that batch could make a difference for you. But otherwise, you have to be currently till the larger industry solves the pilot challenge. You could look at equipment manufacturers. They all carry pilot small scale demonstration units.
True, true. Indeed, very good options. Yes, I will certainly try. And one of the thing it will solve me is that some of the investors during the technical due diligence, they challenge the credibility, because most of the science or POC is developed within your facility. Only testing is given outside. For example, we did some nutritional profiling of our cells or the biomass. There they said, okay, you've done the testing, but what about the other things? So yeah, as you rightly said, if I could run a batch outside in some other facility, that will be good data point. Yes.
No, I don't think you, my personal view,
Yeah.
you should not do this for one investor or one funding or whatever. You are building the science, right? So you see what is best for you to move from one point to the next point. And forget about the investors unless you're really desperate to get that small check from them, because no matter what you do in the cultivated meat space, people are going to be skeptical because there are a lot of bad news as well in the Western world about how people raise lots of money and never got to price parity. So you demonstrate on paper how you will achieve price parity. I think that's the main problem they need to solve. And one way that I would talk to investors is like, you are putting risk capital, right? Now, if you want to do credibility, okay, you can phase your investment in phase 1, 2, and 3, even within a tranche, right? Like you say you're raising $5 million, or okay, $1 million. You can start with saying you commit to 1 million, but you give me the rest after I do my demonstration, which I will do in Europe, but it will cost me 50 lakhs. But contingent to that, they can do the next investment. So you could make a hybrid model for them to reduce their risk. See, the other thing, in any tech development, all that you're doing right now is reducing the risk. So think about it like, put yourself into the investor's shoes and say, hey, what is his problem? Why is he not investing? Most of the time we'll feel, oh, they don't get it. They don't understand. I'm such a good guy. I'm such a great scientist. Remove all that, become objective. You are the investor. You're looking at your business and you're saying, why put money in it? And if you start looking at it from an investor's point of view, you'll actually solve the investor's questions.
Right. Absolutely. 100% I agree with you. Yeah. Thanks, Subbu. Thanks for valuable insights.
We also have a couple of questions in the chat, Siddharth, if you would like to take that up.
So one of the question is, what would be your suggestion for someone who wants to enter the cultivated meat space in India? Yes, and they're talking about selling the idea, get VC funded, POC, establishment of your company. So I'm assuming this is someone who wants to work in the space of your cultivated meat, but maybe does not want to start up your companies. I hope I'm getting the sense right.
Now, my first question to anyone who wants to enter into this space is why, right? In fact, your investors are going to ask you that question, why are you doing it? You could do 10 other things, why are you doing it? So get that why properly. 2, ask yourself if you're ready to stay in it, float in it, drown in it for the next 5 to 10 years. You will get a lot of answers and clarity in how you're going to go about pitching it. If your idea is, hey, this is the talk of the town and I'm going to make a pitch and investors will write a check, I don't think that's going to happen at all, right? What they're going to check with you is, do you have the complementary co-founders or complementary team strength to do this job. Right now, all the new age, early stage VCs whom I've interacted with, like pre-seed kind of investors, they are betting on the team, not on your product.
Mhm.
So spend more time on your team, get the best guys, which we spoke about earlier, to come on board with you and say, look, here is a team. And if anyone can do it, this team can do it. That is the picture you have to bring, right? Don't hire your brother, your uncle, your sister. I mean, if they're qualified, yes, but if they're not, just don't bring somebody to make the team deck. Go and spend time to bring the right complementary strengths, saying, okay, this guy is good at this, he's done 15 years of this, he's done cancer biology, or he's done XYZ, and bring them on board so that your team deck is strong. If your team deck is strong, your first check from an angel or from a pre-seed investor will be for the team, not for your product. Today you may be making chicken meat, but tomorrow you may think you should make beef, or you may want to make fish or shrimp. So the product is not central here. The team is central. So if you can start with the team, I think getting your initial checks will become easy. So my suggestion is focus more on team and the tech that you will follow, not how far you already got into your tech, because there are many people at different stages. So if I'm a VC, I have you who's going to start the business and somebody who's already made a POC. I have lesser risk with somebody who's made a POC, right? So start with the team and build everything around the team. Then you'll get credibility to raise the funds. 2, make sure that you have a plan for the next 18 months at least. So don't start spending money till you have visibility that you can survive for 18 months, because it works 2 ways. It's a double-edged sword. You hired some bench strength. These could be like MSc or early fresh PhDs who are coming into your company. They are coming for one important job other than your story, which is to get paid. So make sure that you have the runway to pay them, even if you don't have something going on in the lab, because that's very critical for your company to survive. Lastly, I would not recommend you take loans to do something very early stage. Try and find a solution where somebody is sharing your risk. You need to just adjust this a little bit in your head. When an investor comes, what is he doing? He is depending on you to create value. First step. Second step, from your perspective, he is reducing your risk to develop this technology, right? Because if he could do it himself, he would have done it himself. So you're equal partners. So approach your investors as you're taking them on a journey, and they are going to help you get where you want to go, because you're the best team to do. Lastly, don't pledge your house and everything very early on. Reduce the risk for yourself, because unless you are stable, your company will not be stable. Invariably, I've seen PhDs quitting their jobs, taking a 50 lakh grant and starting a company without thinking through what will happen in 18 months. And typically what VCs do is, when you give a projection, they will multiply your expenses by 2 and divide your whatever revenues by half, right? I mean, by 2. So it's a 2x2 model they all use. So you do that yourself, because you have to survive and keep your nose above water. And if you do that, success will come. So your business model should be about being in the business. Just stay in the business. You will be able to succeed down the line. And be very, very conscious about your bias of not invented here. I'm too good for this. I have some problems outside. If I had a lab, I would succeed. These are all things we tell ourselves when we don't do our preparation right. So for anyone entering new, focus on team. Make sure you have an 18-month plan. Don't risk your personal money beyond comfortable limits, because that will demotivate you and not give you any option to do other things should there be a failure. Like there is a talk on the YouTube which says fall forward, but you fall forward, but you should still have strength to get up. So make sure that you are trying to get that stability into your personal life as well, because and the other thing I would always suggest is make sure your friends and family are supporting you in this. Sell the story to them, because they're going to be your go-to place when you get totally screwed in your business.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Subbu sir. Subbu sir, just one supplementary. So this the establishment of company, when should it happen? When we start working on the project, or I mean, we should do it before that? The reason I ask, The reason I ask this, sir, is that if you establish a company, there are so many returns which have to be done, monthly, GST returns and everything which have to be filed. And I mean, it doesn't make a difference whether it's a private limited or a LLP.
No, I will tell you.
Sir.
No investor will invest in a LLP.
Okay, sir.
Because a private limited has better compliance standards from the ROC. So they will, even if you started as a proprietary concern, which you can open in 3 days, they will say, now open a new company in the name of a private limited. Private limited would have a lot more compliance, but it's not too difficult. So get yourself a good auditor. The other mistake all entrepreneurs do is they find the cheapest auditor and the cheapest lawyer. But believe me, in business, you have to invest in a decent auditor who has experience and a decent lawyer who can help you. Lawyer doesn't mean the guy who goes to court to litigation on petty cases, right? You have to look at business lawyers. So you could tap into your friends and network who could help you so that you don't spend too much, but they have the expertise. In terms of creating company, I think when you create the company is not a problem. You could create it today and you could start your business in 6 months, because until you have 20 lakhs in revenues, you don't need to file any GST. So if you are investing and trying to do research, you don't really need to do having to file the GST. You'll absorb anyone who's billing to you as your cost. It's just that you're not selling anything anyway, you're going to pay that, even if you registered and filed for GST. So I would suggest that you think, like I said, creating the company, when to create, who's my auditor, what will be the compliance details is part of the preparation, and get that job done. In fact, your logo, copywriting your logo, copywriting your website, trademark, this you can do even without a company, right? Because you can do it as an individual and then transfer these assets to your company. So having somebody who can advise you on the various stages of compliance will help you do, but it's not difficult. Nowadays, GST is online. You won't have more than 10 employees in the initial phase, so you don't need to align to any labor laws. When you hire somebody, you have to only deduct professional tax. You're not going to do PF, ESI, and all those things. And if you have a problem, just outsource to somebody who can give you the resource so you don't do the compliance, right? You could be a very operationally light company as well. And then there is proprietary concern, there's limited partnerships, LLP, and then there is private limited. But if you're thinking of fundraising, it's better you are a private limited. Even if you're applying to DST or any grants, it's better you are registered as a company. And when you want to open the company is very subjective to the readiness of your preparation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Extremely grateful, sir. Thank you so much.
So the question is about scientific writers, regulatory writers who can deal with scientific regulatory affairs in a company. So like I already mentioned, one of the most important thing for scaling is regulatory compliance, right? Like, for example, you have this National Biodiversity Act. You're the best person to look at regulatory affairs and see where the company may have a challenge. Scientific writers, in fact, we hired a scientific writer as one of the first employees, because that's where the pitch comes. The scientific writer is going to help you make a great pitch deck, right? So if they can have a little additional competence in, putting the design together, working with a designer. So typically what we all do is we go and make our own slide decks, right? And we use whatever tools are available. Believe me, that won't be as professional as you can pay 500 rupees to someone who's a designer, who's working with one of these media companies to do that slide design for you. If you look at any company in the West or in Israel or in Europe, their slides are brilliant. Like I spent about 2,000 rupees per slide after I made the content, and I sent it out to somebody and said, hey, can you make this look good? Not that I don't know how to do the slides, but a scientific writer is the best person who can sell the narrative. So if you are a scientific writer, I think you have a great opportunity because you can help the entrepreneur to sell the story. And if you are into regulatory affairs, obviously we had a previous question which concerns nothing but regulatory matters. So I think it's a good opportunity for anyone who's writing content or who are involved in regulatory affairs.
I
How did I manage to shift from textiles sales field to biotech? Well, that was quite easy. See, when you're starting, you have to only solve for your immediate cash flow, right? When you become somebody great and who spends, say, 1 crore a month, you're actually, your hurdle is higher. But if you are a startup and you are now looking to create something new, first thing is get your family in order, right? To do that, you need to earn just say 1 lakh, 2 lakh, whatever it is. So for me, I was like, if I can cover my base, I should be able to do something exciting. The other thing is, I think it's not about the education. Like in our company, in Laurus Bio, Richcore became Laurus Bio. My operation guy used to fix gambling machines in Reno, Nevada, right? I said he's the best operations guy because he'll know where to catch the costs and do it. So he's not a finance guy. So I hired a guy who was a non-biotech guy, non-operations guy, but who was building gambling machines. I mean, at least to check if somebody is rigging it. My marketing guy was someone who did client servicing. So he was not a biotech engineer or anything itself. So there are two parts in a biotech business, deep and shallow. So your core science guys have to be deep. Like everything I learned in biotech, I've learned from my team. So when I hired someone, the interview is a learning experience because you're going to ask them and say, oh, what did you do there? Oh, I made mRNA technology. Okay, tell me about it. How did you do it? What is the science you use? Then you start connecting the dots. So for me, I'm a shallow guy, I would say, because I can't go and run an fermenter or I can't do gene editing or nor can I isolate cells from a cow or anything like that. But you got to add value to the guys who know how to do it. So I would say, as an entrepreneur, you need to connect the dots. So you need to understand the science and they will respect you if you can add value to them or make them look at a problem in a way they cannot look at it. And believe me, the core scientists are so deep into the science that they hardly look up. Right? They keep drilling down and knowing more and more about their science. They don't know how business works. They don't know how scale works. They don't know how many things work, but they know very well about what they do. So leverage that learning from them. Ask them to make presentations for you. So what I did, every time I wanted to make something, I would ask people, no matter how senior or junior they are, to explain what they are doing or come up with a presentation. And that was a habit. And then you add value from your shallow connecting the dot experience. So that's how I made transition to this. And now many times when I go to speak somewhere, they call me Dr. Subbu and I get ashamed. So I tell them, I give them a disclosure, hey, I'm not a doctor, right? Because with time, you'll be an expert. So for anyone who's a non-core science guy, you have a lot of skills that the science guys need. In fact, most of the biotech entrepreneurs are failing because they are technical people. They don't have a business guy on their phone. Any technical person will not understand legal documents, will not understand commercial terms and negotiation. They'll all be passion, emotion, science. I know my science. So you are the complementary strength for them. So try to focus on your strength and then add value to them. And then it's a team. That's about it.
Hi, Sharmila. I think you have access to your microphone now. I hope that answered your question. If you have anything else, do unmute and ask.
Yeah, he answered it very well. So I'm thankful for this. I appreciate this.
My pleasure.
All right, Sharmila. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Yashantra has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just promoting her again. Yashu, you can go ahead now.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Perfect. So Subbu, you were talking about like the importance of forming the initial team, right? So what are your thoughts on the aspect of creating an ESOP pool and what are the factors you would consider when allocating a certain percentage for the early on experts who you bring on to the team? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to break it into two parts. First, founders themselves. Typically, what I have seen, 4 people come together, divide the company into 4, 25, 25, 25, and then all hell will break loose. Right? Because all 4 are not the same. But then we are friends, we did a project together, we're saying, let's be nice to each other, let's do 25%. Don't do that. If it's your idea, you're building the company, you need to be in the driver's seat. Everybody is coming for a ride. They're coming for the ride because you're taking the first step, first risk. You quit the job first. Somebody's going to quit after 6 months. You need to get. So your equity distribution, please understand, equity is only 100%. It does not increase with time. With time, your percentage shareholding will only reduce if you're going to bring investors. Okay. Treat equity 1,000 times more expensive than the money you have in your pocket. Equity funding is the most expensive funding you can get. If your business can get debt, you should do debt, in my opinion. And I think most people's opinion. So when you distribute equity, even with your team, and if you are the founder, I would say, vest those shares even to your co-founders. You say that they will get X% of shares every year for the next 4 years, so that they stay for the 4 years for you to succeed. Else what would happen? Once you give equity, it's like giving a title to a property. You cannot take it back from them unless they're willing to give it back or sell it. You can't even take it back because you have to pay them to take it back because you have sold a property to them. So when you say giving equity, please understand, you're giving a piece of property. Think of it in real terms, like you have land of 100 acres and you gave 10 acres to somebody. You can never take it back from them. So you may as well be stingy in how you share your equity, or you share equity based on how much risk and how much value they add to you at the founder level. Now coming to ESOP, if team members are joining just for ESOP, I wouldn't even offer it. Right? You're a startup. Now you need to tell them, I'm willing to give ESOP. Don't call it by percentage. The bigger problem we have with giving away ESOP is most founders will start telling, I'll give you 1% of the company. You don't know how much 1% is when you're $1 billion, right? It's a lot of money. I'm not saying be greedy, but I'm saying make that earned rather than given away. So to do that, you could vest the shares. Like ESOPs, most people are vesting them, right? But when you give an ESOP in a pre-revenue company without any valuation fixed, they don't know what the value is either. So it's easy to say, I'll give you like 3% of the company. The company doesn't mean anything. The next check could be at 10 crores, right? So 3% of 10 crores is, say, what, 30 lakhs. That's quite a bit. So what you could do is you could balloon how you will pay ESOPs to your employees over time, but I would not promise ESOPs first up. I would only do it if I'm going to pay somebody who's earning like 2 crores and I'm going to pay them 20 lakhs. I'm going to compensate them with some ESOP, but I will still vest the ESOP over a period of time. Like 3 to 4 years is quite normal. And even for your co-founders, you can vest it, saying that if they leave before that timeline, they only get the shares that you've already vested or given, and the balance 2 years equity will not go to them. It will stay with you. That will allow you to hire somebody else for that equity. And in terms of ESOP, typically any investor who's coming will say, you know what, you create a 10% or 20% ESOP. Like Fermbox, I'm like closing around right now, and the investor said you have to create 10%. I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to do 5% because I may not give away so much ESOP right now. But you always have the power to create more ESOP. So why do it upfront, right? Or you do it in the next round when the value is much higher, so that instead of carving out a percentage, you can carve out number of shares. So this is where the regulatory affairs and others can come into play. For example, you have 100% equity and you could have 1 lakh shares, 10,000 shares, or 1 million shares, right? So instead of calling it by equity, which they may convert in their head, but you just give them number of shares which have a certain value. Or you say, when I raise funds, I will give you equity shares worth X, rather than going with a percentage. I would recommend don't do percentage-based equity distribution. It will end up being very expensive. Like, believe me, as you go longer in your investment cycle, dilution, the only thing that will happen is you will get demotivated when your equity starts dripping. Most of the large companies that you may be hearing about, they would be having like 4%, 5%, but they are unicorns, they are this, they are that, but literally the investors are running their company. Don't get into that trap. You create real value, real cash, then there's better chance for you to hold your equity together so that you can use it the way you want when you need it.
Understood, Subbu. Just a quick clarification, if I may. So, for example, now that we're looking at an expert, like we discussed earlier, bringing on board, right? So they were previously earning quite a bit of salary package, which we won't be able to afford them at this moment. So how would you recommend us to go about talking about the ESOP conversation with them?
Okay, the first thing you have to do is to get to the drawing board and draw how your organization is going to look. Okay, who are the critical people? What is the core skill sets you want in each of these positions? Don't put people's names, put the organogram and say, look, I need to have a CTO, I need to have a finance CFO, I need to have blah, blah, right? You put the organogram and then you think you have a bag of goodies and see how you think you can distribute to them. That's all you have. You don't have more than that. Now, what happens is when you found one particular expert who's going to change the day for you, your tendency is to give away a lot more because you didn't think about who else is going to come. So this is part of preparation too. Do an organogram and say, this is the shares I can give to my co-founders or to the experts who will come, and I don't have more than that. Then automatically your mind will start saying, oh, I can't give more than this, right? And then you'll build a story around to still make that attractive to them. Number two, I want to know the specific about this person. Where is he coming from or she coming from? Why is she or he excited to join you? What is in it for them? Always look at it from what is in it for them. As entrepreneurs, we are so charged about, oh, wow, he's willing to join me that we will just lay out the red carpet. Don't forget, it's your story. They're joining you. So look, and why are they joining you? It will have something in the Maslow's. They want to create something. They want to have freedom. Maybe they want to quit their job. Maybe they don't have options to join anywhere. Do some homework, because at the end of the day, you have to build a case. So my take is, any person joining any company, they're going to look for four things. One, they need to get paid, no doubt. Second, they'll be looking for a challenge. They want to do something more than what they did. Three, they will want freedom. They'll want freedom to fail. They'll want freedom for mistakes, because that's when you'll do innovation. Four, they'll want respect. Many times these big experts are leaving multinationals because they are like a dot in the ocean and they want to be meaningful. So play on that. So when we do a compensation, you could have a balance between all the four, and you will know which person is looking more of what. I have seen people who are quitting multinationals because they're so bored. They're like, whatever I'm doing is not meaningful. So give them a better role, give them a better designation, give them visibility, get them to your investor meetings, tell them you'll be part of all our strategic discussions, because in their roles, maybe they're not doing that. So it's very specific to the individual that you're talking to. Why are they going to join you? Are they going to join you full time? What is in it for them? When we succeed, what is the possibility of them making 10 times or 20 times the money they are making or will make in that much time? That is how you would first think, plan, and then know how much you can give away to them. And trust me, there is nobody who is not dispensable. There is no expert you cannot find an alternate to. Don't fall into the trap like, without him, I will not succeed, because actually without you, you will not succeed, right? So be very, very cautious on why you're bringing them on and what is in it for them. This is not a science, it's going to be an art. And you know personally why this expert, what if they are the best guys to run the business, why are you should join their company, right?
Understood, Subbu. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's truly impactful what you said, right? Like without me, it'll not work out. So I should be more diligent on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll just quickly check. I know there's no more questions questions in the Q&A box and no one's raised their hands. Just checking. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Or otherwise, I think we've covered a lot of ground today through this entire conversation. And even from our end, I think we learned so much. So we would close off the session. So I'll just give like a minute. Is there anyone else who wants to ask anything else?
I have a closing remark I want to share.
Yes, please go ahead.
Only two things. One, never give up. Okay. Two, leverage everything. Leverage everyone. Anyone you know in your network. Everybody will be of use someday or the other. So make sure you spend all your time building relations. Don't have any snobbish situations where you can't talk to someone. Always be nice. Keep a big smile. Shit happens. So I would say never give up and leverage everything.
I think those are just like great words to end this session on in terms of everything that we have shared. That's a good encapsulation of everything. Thank you so much, Subbu, for joining us today. And thank you everyone else as well. I'm sure that everything that you said has really struck a chord with all our founders today in terms of just not just going through ISPIC, but their entire startup journey as well. I am sure that it's very insightful for even me, Siddharth and Devika, just to hear your thoughts and your entire journey. It's been great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on board again.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
And have a good weekend.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.